Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more overly sarcastic productions, and this time Trope Talk Darkest Hours. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I'd love if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Now, this Darkest Hours are perhaps the best moments in the book because it is where everything is culminating together, and I don't just mean all of the tiny plot hooks that the author was throwing, hinting at you throughout the book. Yes, those are a part of it. I'm talking everything comes together within the darkest hour. The themes, the plot hooks, the characters, the emotion, everything is coming together in the darkest hour. And what I mean by theme, right? Like theme is really what I think makes a story have longevity. I don't think if you were like David Benioff and D.B. Weiss of Game of Thrones, where you're like, themes are for sixth grade school projects, you're fucking stupid. Themes are what make a story last. Okay? George R. R. Martin, like Game of Thrones, the TV show was at its best when it understood its themes and actively, promoted those themes, right? Uh, the books, George's story, is very much an anti-war and the anti-war side of things. I think for me it comes through, and also the idea of, but I think perhaps more so his theme of even even a good person, right? A good person failing will still be like they'll still like affect change, right? Even if you try and fail, you will still have done something. You will still have left a positive mark on the world, right? Ned Stark, um, he tried and failed to do the right thing, right? But because he was you know, he tried to do the right thing, uh, in all like aspects of his life, he tried his best. He is fondly remembered by everyone, right? Um, Jaime Lannister's internal struggle is that, right? Jaime's internal struggle is that's his internal strife there as well. The like he wants to be a person that's remembered. He desperately wants that, but he's also stuck between the love he feels he has to have for his blood family, right? He's conflicted on where he's supposed to line up. Um, like his duty, what he views as his duties, gives him his struggles. Um, and like the Star Wars, the theme of hope in Episode 6, when Luke throws away the lightsaber and then he starts getting zapped. Um, Darth Vader throwing Palpatine over the edge. That's part of the darkest hour. That is where all through that moment are the themes George Lucas was trying to weave in of hope, right? Coming together at the end, hope and family. Um, uh, I don't really have any other good examples off the top of my head, but um, yeah. Darkest Hour with Avatar: The Last Airbender. The themes of Avatar: The Last Airbender come together there in the final fight. In the final fights is just Darkest Hour, Chef's Kiss, and they're also so much fun to write. Darkest Hours are a blast to write. That is where you will constantly see, like, you will consistently see authors. Like, I have yet to meet an author that says they struggle with writing this part of their story, because this also tends to be the climactic point of the story, or that point right before the climax. And sometimes it can include the fall. It can be a part of the falling action. It depends on the theme the author's trying to tell. Um, uh, but yeah, the this is where an author, a writer, is going to be just typing away and able to churn out a fuck ton of words really fucking fast, because this is what they've been building to. It's just, it is the most satisfying, most enjoyable part of writing a story. I've rambled for 5 minutes. Let's dive in.
This video is sponsored by our friends at World Anvil, for when you just gotta hammer out those little plot details. Ayy. Most people like a happy ending, and most happy endings are about heroes winning. But in order for that win to really mean something, we usually have to watch the heroes lose a lot first. Mentors die, artifacts are lost, friends are damseled, innocents are hurt, villains win.
Gandalf goes over the edge, Death Star destroys Alderaan. Who the hell is Bucky? They beat up Naraku, but he escapes again. Sokovia Accords. Optimus Prime dies again. Whoa, what kind of story are we writing here? There's a lot of stuff happening.
For the heroes to win in the end, the villains usually have to win in the beginning and middle. And because narrative pacing is a thing, in most cases
because rule of 3.
Heroes aren't allowed to win until they go through what is known as a darkest hour. A hero's darkest hour is the lowest point in the story, where the situation is at
status quo. Inciting incident disrupts status quo, assorted adventures from bad to worse. Oh boy, oh cripes.
At its worst, and our heroes at their most hopeless. One or more characters might be dead or dying, the villains are winning or have already won, and the heroes are dealing with despair. This is the part where even the audience is questioning if they're going to be able to do it. But we can't stay in the darkest hour forever. It can be gradual or sudden, but the heroes will emerge from the darkest hour, changed for the better, and prepped for a final victory. The darker the darkest hour, the more cathartic the victory will be. Narratives are usually about overcoming some kind of conflict, and this is the part of the story where that comes to a head. Darkest hours see a lot of use in fiction, not all of them obvious. For example, many superhero origins are darkest hours. Spider-Man and Batman experience darkest hours after the death of their loved ones, feel personally responsible for the tragedy, and devote themselves to stopping that tragedy from ever repeating itself. It's a rare case where the hero's darkest hour happens before they really get their personal story started, where the darkest hour is also the inciting incident. And in my pure evil trope talk, I also mentioned a villain trope, the third act breakdown, where a villain's machinations crumble around them and they freak out to an unprecedented degree. This is essentially a villain's darkest hour. The only difference is we're usually rooting for the heroes in this scenario. But while other wacky versions exist,
in general, proportionally lighter tone might feature a partial victory for the heroes. Act 1. Act 2. Things start getting a bit moodier. Darkest hour zone. Act 3. End of the darkest hour signals the beginning of the finale. Climax. Heroes win. I mean, the heroes don't have to win for the darkest hour to end either.
Most darkest hours happen after the halfway point of the story and serve a semi-inciting role in whatever the climax or finale will be. Now, before we go further, I think it's important to subdivide darkest hours into two categories: personal darkest hours and plot darkest hours. Plot darkest hours happen in almost every story. They're the narrative point where the situation looks its most hopeless. The bad guy army is wreaking havoc, the rom-com love interest is boarding the plane, the supervillain has the hero in a death trap, etc. Technically, you could argue that every story has a plot darkest hour in the same way that every finite two-dimensional curve has a minimum value.
Correction. Every finite two-dimensional and continuous curve has a maximum... Oh god, math. And two-dimensional is optional TBH. I know you don't care, but I'd be dishonoring my degree if I spread math misinformation. Red, I don't even understand the words that you are saying here in your correction.
There will be a point in every story where things look worst, but sometimes it's more of a little blip than a major story beat. And while plot darkest hours have some associated tropes, they're not where the real drama happens. Personal darkest hours are more...
The character undergoes an interval of extreme hopelessness, and they must undergo character development to escape.
Well, personal. They're when a character is experiencing an awful emotional low point and feels completely hopeless. A character in this scenario will sink, feeling trapped in some way, and the only way to escape this personal darkest hour is through the power of character development. A personal darkest hour is almost...
Circumstances force character into personal crisis. That's me every single morning. Character cannot overcome the crisis as they currently are. That is me in the afternoon. Character changes, allowing them to overcome or to bypass the obstacle. I've never experienced that in my life.
It's always a pivotal character development moment. We touched on this a little when Blue covered the hero's journey, where Campbell described the darkest hour as the belly of the whale, where the hero finds themselves incapable of progressing as they are and must change in some way in order to carry on. Campbell didn't have many good ideas, but this was a pretty solid one. A character experiencing a personal darkest hour is stopped from progressing by themselves and must change themselves to move forward. This change can be the simple, helpful determination to carry on even if things look rough, but it can can also be much less optimistic. God of War 4, also known as Dad of Boy, had a very striking personal darkest hour for Kratos when his son Atreus becomes very sick as a result of his own warring nature. Atreus is a god, but he doesn't realize and he thinks he's human, and Kratos has been so unwilling to confront or explain his own past shenanigans that Atreus is straight up dying because of it. Kratos, who's spent the entire game staying as far from his origins as he can, slowly, brutally returns home, haunted by visions of the goddess Athena as he retrieves the Blades of Chaos, the iconic weapons of the older games, as well as the ultimate symbol of Kratos' slavery to the gods and his old life of brutality and crazy knife-swinging combos. He escapes his darkest hour by reclaiming his truly awful past and accepting that he's a monster, but he's not Athena's monster anymore. Not exactly the hopeful optimism one might expect, but it's still cathartic in its own way, and more.
Fucking love God of War 2018. When the game came out, I played it. Oh my god, I don't even. I literally would. I had to go to class. I was in community college at the time, and had a full ride scholarship, as I said. Actually, no, I say that in. Did I talk about it in? I've talked about it in some video, or is it in a video that is getting uploaded after this one? So I tend to record Trope Talks as like the last video, but then I upload them as like in a different. I don't. My recording is weird. I'm not gonna try to. But anyways, in community college, I had a scholarship that paid for tuition, and so I worked for like 8 months at GameStop, and then I quit because that place sucked. And then I just like the money that I had saved from that, I just rolled with that for the last like year and a half I had of community college to go. And then when I went to university, I went and got it. Before I got to like in the summer before university, I started a different job. But then after I graduated community college, anyways, this game when it came out, I didn't pre-order it because I didn't think I would like it because of the previous God of War games weren't my style. I'm never going to play the previous God of War games because that gameplay is really not my style. And but then I had a friend stream it, and I was like, holy shit, that looks great. So then I went to GameStop, was very lucky they had one copy left. I grabbed it, went home, fucking played it, hooked. I played that game, I'm fairly certain, 12 hours a day until I finished it, my first playthrough. And then I immediately started a new playthrough after I beat it. And I think I still played it for like 5 to 8 hours a day. This was before I got back into writing. So I was literally just like I can't believe the amount of like looking back at how much time I spent. I'm like, what did I do with my time when I wasn't in class? Because community college really didn't leave me, like I didn't have to do much work. And I wasn't writing. I was literally just playing video games. Kind of sucked. I'm not gonna lie. I don't like looking back at that. It makes me feel weird. But anyway, this game, I fucking love God of War 2018. I was not as hooked by Ragnarok. I don't know if that's just because I'm not as into teen angst anymore. I kind of find it a little annoying. And of course, part of Atreus' journey in Ragnarok is that kind of teenage angst. He's got to figure himself out. And that's not my thing. But like, I loved Odin and Thor in I feel like there could have been more with the exploration. The exploration was what was lacking for me in Ragnarok compared to 2018. 2018 I think has it pretty much perfect, the exploration. Ragnarok, I don't know, Ragnarok felt off to me. I don't know what it was. I had a similar feeling with Jedi Fallen Order and comparing it to Jedi Survivor. Jedi Fallen Order, yes, there are a couple of spots that are annoying to explore, but I still didn't mind it as much. Jedi Survivor, I was fucking frustrated trying to explore like every single map. I did not care for Jedi Survivor that much. Now, this isn't exactly a one-to-one comparison. I fucking love God of War Ragnarok. I think it should have won Game of the Year in 2022. I really dislike Elden Ring. I do not think Elden Ring has a good story. Because what the work I have to put in to experience the story, fuck right off. When it comes to story, one of the things you will learn in a creative writing course that I think is exceptionally crucial to learn is the balancing how much effort the reader has to put in to understanding what is going on, to understanding the plot, so that they aren't like, there's a certain amount of confusion that you should give them, right? They should be confused to a certain point. And depending on upon the type of book you are writing, you should leave like what your goal is, right? But when it comes to video games, I think you have to, especially with the way they advertised Elden Ring as being more approachable for a general audience. No. 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 Also, Ragnarok, I find Ragnarok's story like anyways. I could go forever about how much I fucking hate Elden Ring.
More importantly, it's the only way he can move forward. If he doesn't recognize and accept his own past, his son, his future will die. But personal darkest hours can also be very hopeful and optimistic. A really overt illustration of one of these comes in the Teen Titans Season 4 finale, where Trigon has emerged, destroyed like 99.9% of the world, and his daughter Raven is reduced to a 99.9% powerless child. While Raven feels hopeless, since the worst case scenario has already happened and the bad guy has won, Robin and the rest of the gang refuse to give up, and when she sees them actually manage to hurt Trigon, just that little spark of hope is enough to leverage that 0.1% power she still has, since her powers are, controlled by her emotions. Just by seeing that Trigon can be hurt, she goes from hopeless to just a bit hopeful, and just a bit hopeful is all she needs to realize that not only can Trigon be hurt, she can hurt him. This leads to a full-on hope-induced power-up where she gets all her power back and then some, and then effortlessly kicks his ass. But these two examples actually help illustrate another internal distinction in Darkest Hours. See, most personal Darkest Hours have two components. This sucks and I'm miserable, and I don't know how to make the situation better. And solving one doesn't automatically solve the other. Actually, the best example of this split comes from that literary monolith Lord of the Rings, where in the Two Towers, Sam and
Never heard of it.
Frodo on the steps of Cirith Ungol discuss how it feels like they're at the absolute lowest point of their story, and how if they were in a book, this would probably be where the kids would ask their dad to stop reading because things are so bad and how can they ever get better. The split is in how our heroes respond. Sam finds a reason to keep on hoping, while Frodo resolves to continue onward even without hope. Sam works the emotional problem, feeling hopeless and miserable, while Frodo focuses on the practical problem, escaping the terrible situation.
This is why they need each other. Fucking. And again, I think I've said this before. Fucking in Return of the King, Lord of the Rings should have gotten a 12th nomination, and they should have won it for fucking Samwise Gamgee. Sean Astin here should have gotten nominated for an Oscar for his performance as Samwise in Return of the King, because every time I would, and he should have won. He should have won. I know there were a couple of tough people there. Also, like, I'm gonna be honest, out of all of the Oscar nominees in that of 2003 movies, this is the one that gets remembered the most. So this is the better one. Like, even on a technical aspect, Sean Astin fucking killed it.
By getting to Mordor and destroying the ring, no matter how bad they feel. Now, most stories really only require the hero to solve one of these. If they feel hopeful, or if they draw up the strength to carry on, even if they have no way to deal with the other part, the story will usually reward them with the full solution. The hero musters up the determination to continue fighting on their own, and just then the cavalry arrives to back them up so they don't die in the process. Now, I bring this up specifically because I feel like this has kind of reflected into the real world in a slightly unfortunate way. See, Darkest Hours closely resemble depression, but the social understanding of depression is pretty bad and inaccurate. It looks and often feels like it's a bad situation.
Depression resembles feeling hopeless because things are bad, so fix the cause to feel better, when it's actually feeling hopeless because your brain and body decided to seize the means of dopamine production. I love that definition.
that you can fix in order to escape and feel better again, like a fictional Darkest Hour. But in actuality, depression usually has no external cause because it's literally your brain refusing to produce the right neurotransmitters in the right amounts. Someone dealing with depression hears a lot
Oh yeah, I've had days like that. You should just go out and treat yourself, dude. Hasn't had the energy to brush their hair in weeks. Yeah.
of advice from people describing how they pulled themselves out of short-lived bad moods that had tangible causes, and none of it is usable because it's solving the wrong problem. Because the Darkest Hour
Because Darkest Hours only last as long as the character lets it, are fixed by dramatic displays of willpower, have tangible, correctable causes. These concepts are applied to a real-world thing that only superficially resembles it. Depression often requires treatment, therapy, etc. Can't simply be willed away, and thinking it can make them feel at fault for the condition. Yes. This is honestly where it becomes pretty difficult, and I'm really curious how Brandon Sanderson is going to handle Kaladin's depression. Now, I've only read book 2 in the Stormlight Archives. I have not yet read book 3 or 4, but I am curious how Kaladin's depression, how Brandon is going to handle that, because really, depression is an extremely hard thing to handle in a book, specifically purely because of us readers, even us readers with depression, because of our expectations of stories, right? And really just how stories kind of work. Depression is hard to write because I feel like it is difficult to find a balance of that balance between, like, hey, we won, things are looking better, but the character, right, and then the character is still struggling. Because in my own experience, right, of course, I want to feel like I understand how my brain works for the most part. I'm like, yeah, the depression ain't gonna go away. The sadness ain't gonna go away. It's gonna be with me. I have to constantly work at it, right, to make it less less interfering in my day-to-day life, right? It is constant work to improve. And I mean, of course, everyone should be working to constantly improve on a day-to-day basis. There are going to be some days where you take a step back, and that's okay, so long as you're trying every single day to do better, right? As long as you're given on a day-to-day basis, per day, based on how your emotions are feeling on that day, giving it your best effort. And sometimes you have a day where it's really fucking rough and you just want to lay in bed all day. That's okay. That's okay. That's you. That is still you putting in some effort to improve, right? You resting all day. That's what your body is needing from you to improve on that day, right? That's how I look at it. This is turning way deeper than I thought this episode would go. But right, it's just in my own personal thought, like, a part of my brain wants to be like, even though it realizes that this is not the case, it's like it wants to look at a thing and be like, if I can get that, then my problems will go away. Like, is that healthy? I don't know. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. It may not be. But for me, I feel like it helps. Because it's like, it gives me a little bit of inspiration to keep pushing forward. And I think that's really largely where you gotta, right? Gives me a reason to keep pushing forward. Just keep finding things to push forward. But like, from a narrative perspective, right? It's like, depending on the story you're telling, right? It's like, it's tough to write. I feel like one book off the top of my head that did this well would be Hunger Games with Katniss's PTSD and depression. Um, be like that where the story ends, the world is in a better place now that both Snow and Coin are dead. Um, Katniss is retired. She has kids with the love of her life, Peeta. She has a healthy relationship. They've both experienced some things. They are both right. They are trying to do better. And so I think, right, like Katniss's problems aren't cured at the end of the Hunger Games. She still has those issues, but the way it was handled, I felt was masterfully, was done extremely well, was handled right. Now I got to reread the books to ensure. I'm just going off of what I remember here when I read the books 13 years ago. Um, that's where I'm going off of. So what I remember, it felt like it was handled well, and what I've seen online from people on the internet, on TikTok and things like that, is that they also kind of consider it to be handled pretty well. Her stuff was not. She's still struggling after everything is over, and that's okay. I just think it's just a little tough in terms of, specifically if we apply it to fantasy. When we apply it to fantasy and what our general expectations of fantasy are, it's kind of right. It becomes a little tougher, I feel like, to write that story. Have that character be clinically depressed, exceptionally depressed. And so I'm really curious how Brandon is going to handle it uh, going forward. And it's something I want to attempt. But man, it's intimidating.
Narrative tells us that raw determination and hopefulness will bend the story to reward you with a fix to all your problems, the real-world reflections of this turn sour fast. It doesn't fit the narrative that yoga and nature walks and a positive attitude won't fix the serotonin machine, and this can be, well, depressing. Sometimes things just feel bad. There's not always a root cause or something on the outside to fix. Stories teach us that things feel bad because things are bad, and it's the hero's responsibility to make things better, and then they'll be able to feel better. And while this is sometimes true, it's not always true, and it's important to know that so you don't beat yourself up over feeling bad about something. It's an unfortunate truth that
people learn from fiction, and that's fine and also cannot be stopped. But we got to be careful about what lessons we unknowingly internalize. Yes. I don't know how to expand upon this.
Even though we know that fiction is not representative of reality, we still learn from fiction and compare it to reality. This is a case where the fictional structure guarantees a cathartic happy ending, which has unfortunate resonances when those lessons are applied to reality. And much like coding, I think this is one of the things that can be unfortunate but kind of can't be avoided.
Which is also why I think stories like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings are the types of stories that are going to persist for long after we're gone, because they are intrinsically within those stories is the message of hope, but in none of those stories is the issue gone, right? Tolkien makes it very clear when you read further than just the Lord of the Rings that problems are still existing, right? There were issues before Sauron. And essentially that's telling you there are going to be issues after Sauron. Sauron's defeated. That does not mean evil is gone from the world. There's still constant effort, right? And like we see that specifically actually with the Scouring of the Shire. The hobbits did their duty. They defeated Sauron. They destroyed the One Ring. And then they get to their home and it was taken by Saruman. And they have to free their home. They still have to do another fight. They still have to keep working they still have to keep working for that bright future. And that's why I think stories like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars are going to last, and why they are actually good examples of this, and kind of why they tend to also, I feel like, be stories that people with depression kind of link towards. um, because they are stories full of hope, right? They are stories full of hope for that brighter future, but they also recognize they are stories that inherently, internally recognize the issues are not going to go away once like a big bad is defeated. Issues are still going to linger. We're still going to have struggles. But there is still always a brighter future, and it's something that we always got to keep working towards. That's why that's personally why I love Lord of the Rings and Star Wars on those merits. When Star Wars is a mixed bag, mainly because when people um move away from the inherent tropes that is Star Wars. Star Wars stories are essentially the central theme of Star Wars, and every single Star Wars story that is told should be hope and hope for a brighter future. When the story moves away from that or does a piss poor job of like conveying that is the theme, right? Like the sequel trilogy. The only uh movie in the sequel trilogy that got that theme across was The Last Jedi. Episode 7 and 9, there were no themes there. Or if there were, they were so poorly done I couldn't see them. And usually I'm usually pretty generous in giving benefit of the doubt to movies. I tend to give benefit of the doubt to stories because I myself am a writer, right? And so I find myself to be more lenient because I'm like, well, I could see what the writer was trying to do, so I'm gonna give them some like brownie points or whatever. Right? If I can see what the writer was trying to do, if I can see what they're trying to do, you know, I'm, still like appreciative of the story that they were trying to write. But with episode 7 and 9, I am not. Those suck ass. Quite frankly, those are terrible movies. There's nothing of substance in either of those movies. Episode 8, while still, I think, missing the mark, it still tried to tell a Star Wars story in a different way. In a more, I guess, aggressive way, right? Because Rian Johnson is like, I want like 50% of people to hate the movie and another 50% to hate it or whatever, to love it, right? He had that quote or some shit. Personally, I'm in disagreement with that. I don't want people to hate the story that I write. I want everyone to like it, but be able to discuss it on a deeper meaning. But yeah, Star Wars is at its best when the story is about hope and a brighter future, not when it's like Solo. Solo's a fun movie, but it doesn't. It also kind of, I think, lacks a theme. Rogue One, I think, is fantastic because personally, I feel like I can see the inherent Star Wars theme, and then also the theme that the director and writers were wanting to incorporate into it. I feel like Rogue One is fantastic. Andor is fantastic because its themes are very fucking clear. Um, like you gotta, when it comes to writing stories, you have to know the medium in which you are writing in, and also if you are adding into an if you are adding onto an already established franchise, you have to look at the themes of what made this franchise good, right? And you have to make those inherent into you have to play into the themes of the story. You cannot go into Star Wars and write a story that isn't about hope. If you don't have hope in your story, your Star Wars story is gonna fucking suck ass. It is what it is. Andor is about the constant struggle, about the hope for a better future, the constant fight for a better future. That is the central theme of Andor and anti-imperialism. Right? Like, ugh. Ugh. Anyway, that's that's that
avoided.
tangent.
People learn lessons from fiction. It's just important to recognize how much of our worldview is defined by fiction and to be suspicious of any conclusions we draw from those parts. Anyway, let's dial down the life lessons here and take a look at some ways The Darkest Hour has been
Yep,
done very
so
well
we had
and some
30
ways it
minutes of
sometimes
life
falls
lessons.
apart. Many episodic shows will have a Darkest Hour of some scale in every season finale. Avatar, for example, has one in all three. In the first season, The Darkest Hour, both narratively and literally, comes when Admiral Zhao kills the moon spirit. One thing you'll notice is that storytellers like projecting the narrative bleakness of The Darkest Hour onto the world overall, so Darkest Hours in visual media are usually also visually dark, and this one's no exception. Everything fades to black and white, except for the ocean spirit when it fuses with Aang to form a rampaging kaiju, and Princess Yue's eyes, which stay blue to signify her lingering connection with the moon spirit. This Darkest Hour doesn't last too long, as they quickly realize Yue can sacrifice her life to restore the moon spirit, and Aang spends most of it wreaking havoc on the Fire Nation soldiers, but it's a pretty emotional low point nonetheless. It's outdone by the Season 2 finale, though, where after some pretty significant character development where it looks like Zuko might actually turn to the side of good, he instead turns right back to being a bad guy and helps Azula fight the good guys. Iroh is captured, Azula hits Aang with lightning, and he dies, and the gang barely manages to escape. Aang's only brought back by Katara's magic healing water, and it's still a pretty significant downer, especially since the gang is fully on the run, the Earth Kingdom has fallen, and Aang has lost access to the Avatar state. No
Hold on, let's not forget the other Darkest Hour in Season 2. Appa getting fucking stolen. My last rewatch of Avatar: The Last Airbender, like, I didn't cry when Appa got stolen as a kid, because, like, as a kid, I guess I didn't pay as much attention. But, like, I rewatched it, like, a couple years ago was the last time. I was bawling, man. I was bawling when Appa got stolen, okay? In Appa's Lost Days, and then the like, mini episode or whatever. Fucking tears, all right? And then fucking Iroh comes in with his song, and then I'm thinking about Mako. Or Mako, I think. How do you pronounce the actor's name? The actor, the original actor for Iroh got cancer and he passed away, and then his final thing was him recording that song that Iroh sings. Bawling.
No real cathartic victory after this Darkest Hour, which is actually not uncommon in three-part stories like a trilogy or three-season show. The Darkest Hour at the end of Part 2 is usually pretty dark without much in the way of a follow-up victory outside of surviving. You could call it the Empire Strikes Back effect. The Season 3 finale is the finale to the series overall, so its Darkest Hour comes in the middle of the final battle, where Aang is fighting Ozai, Zuko's fighting Azula, and Sokka, Toph, and Suki are trying to take down the airship fleet. Aang starts losing, Zuko gets hit by lightning, Suki is separated from the others by a disintegrating airship, and Sokka and Toph are dangling off the side of an airship, injured, missing all their weapons, and surrounded by enemy soldiers. This cliffhanger is, of course, where one of the episodes ends, and the next episode picks up with Suki swinging in to rescue Sokka and Toph with an airship, Katara fighting Azula in Zuko's place, and Aang unlocking the Avatar state and thoroughly demolishing Ozai's ass. As the final
Literally, I cannot think of a more satisfying episode of television. Literally, the finale of Avatar: The Last Airbender is perfection. I have no complaints. I love it's just perfect to me. It's perfect. It's perfection.
Darkest Hour in the show, this one comes with the most complete victory for the heroes. In ascending order of importance, we see the airship fleet destroyed, Azula defeated, Zuko healed, and Aang totally wrecking Ozai before finding a way to stay true to his pacifist principles while still neutralizing Ozai as a threat. I'd apologize for putting Avatar into every single trope talk I make, but I'm not sorry. Go watch.
Do not apologize for this one. There's a reason why, this show, and this is another thing where we're talking about the themes of the show. They remain. Avatar: The Last Airbender remains so popular, especially, like, we can also use Korra as an example. This is another, like, in terms of Star Wars, where things. Although I do think Korra is way better than the sequel trilogy. Like, Korra, I can rewatch. The sequel trilogy of Star Wars, I cannot bring myself to rewatch it because it just is bad. It does not hit the themes of Star Wars for me. I don't like the story that they were trying to tell. Not for me. I think it's just terrible. But Korra tries. I can see what, like, this is another where as I was saying earlier, I can see what they were trying to do with Korra. They missed the mark, but I can still appreciate the attempt. And I just love the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think it's very interesting. The characters, for the most part, I really love. I do actually enjoy Korra as a character. Her being, like, the opposite of Aang, I find to be interesting. It's just unfortunately Nickelodeon, I think, mainly getting in the way is what ruined the Legend of Korra. But right, like, but let's talk about the theme. Let's go back to the conversation around theme here, because Darkest Hour is all about is about bringing your themes together, right? The themes coming to an endpoint, or whatever the fuck. Um, your themes culminating into this darkest hour with your characters. Um, in Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? Aang's pacifism is part of his, right, and things like his relationship with like the Avatar state. All of this stuff is part of the themes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. When it comes to like war and conflict and trying to find um a peaceful solution in like shitty situations, really. Um, like trying to find a third option, right? You're constantly being told you only have two options. Trying to find a third option is, blah blah blah. That comes together there in Act 3, right there at the end. Korra, less clear about the themes from the start, because originally, from my understanding, The Legend of Korra was going to just be a one season show. They weren't, so like the writers were not able to plan ahead. Um, they weren't able to plan season after season like they were for Avatar: The Last Airbender. Um, Korra, so like season 1 is my actual favorite of the 4 seasons, because it is a complete story from beginning to end. Now with the addition of the 3 other seasons, it kind of does make it a little weirder because of, what happens at the end of season 1, Korra losing her powers and then getting them back from Aang, and then like it's like, well, she already has access. She's already masterful with waterbending, earthbending, and firebending in season 1. She learns airbending by the end of season 1. She has nothing to learn, right? Whereas Aang learned that firebending in season 1. He learned waterbending and firebending in season 1. But he then stopped learning firebending because he hurt Katara. Season 2, he starts learning earthbending. Season 3, he overcomes his fear of hurting Katara and hurting his friends, and he learns firebending, right? That is an example of them having been able to plan out their show. Korra having all 4 elements by the end of season 1, I feel like shows us all. And now, of course, she is like 4 years older than Aang, right? She's 16 at the start of Korra, and Aang was 12 years old at the start of Last Airbender. So there's a little bit of an age difference, and of course, she was taught from a young age because she was found by the White Lotus. Right? Like there is an inherent internal internal logic is there for why she is as good as she is at 3 of the 4 elements, right? The logic is there. However, it doesn't, because of that, like that's where the logic interrupts the flow for a long-running show, right? For what I want from Avatar: The Last Airbender, I want them to be, as the show goes on, I want them to be learning the elements, right? Like Aang did. I want them like season to season, maybe learning a new element or something like that. Something new, right? They're learning something new, which is why I think they also had Korra learn metal bending in like season 4, which that came late, right? But like Korra learning all 4 elements in season 1 kind of shows that the writers were not, the season 1 was supposed to be it, and then because season 2 really shows like they have no plan for the future, but like they gotta write something, so they're like season 2, and then when season 2 ended, they were given seasons 3 and 4, which is why then we see season 3 and 4 have a more cohesive story together, right? Why they fit better together. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm rambling.
Budget. Do it,
I
even if
lost
you've
the
already
original
watched
point.
it. I'll wait. Hopping from generation-defining cartoons to generation-defining movies, Avengers has its darkest hour around the halfway point of the movie, when Loki wreaks havoc on the helicarrier, ejecting Thor and the Hulk, and Coulson dies. Kinda. I hear Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. makes this complicated. The splintered team faces a communal darkest hour before resolving to unite and kick Loki's ass, leading into the third act where they're just fighting a big faceless space army. Marvel movies don't quite follow a consistent formula since they're all done by different directors, but they've all got those Marvel fingerprints on them, and a lot of them do feature a darkest hour, even if it's a little bit token. This is actually a problem sometimes when the darkest hour is pretty minimal, like maybe things look rough but it doesn't really seem to be hitting the characters that hard. The audience will empathize with the characters more readily than they'll feel for the plot overall, so even if it looks like the bad guys might win, if the heroes don't seem to personally care, your audience might not either. This is a thing in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, which is a great movie overall, but it kind of has its darkest hour split.
I haven't watched
Structurally, the darkest hour happens after Ronan kicked their asses and got the Power Stone, just before the team decides to be a team, when they do that thing where they're all sitting in a room and then one by one stand up and say they're going to do something. This is structured like the darkest hour, where things look hopeless but the heroes resolve to do something anyway, but nobody actually seems really bummed. Like, the character focus up to this point was more on Peter failing to flirt with Gamora, or Drax not getting subtlety, or Groot being cute. So it's a fine scene, but it doesn't really feel dark. The actual dark scene comes in the middle of the final fight, when Groot sacrifices himself to save the rest of the Guardians. This is a huge downer, and it's accompanied by a structural darkest hour where all the heroes are down and the bad guy is up, looking like he's about to win. Peter breaks the darkest hour by dancing at Ronan and singing "Ooh child, things are gonna get easier," which is a little on the nose for a darkest hour, and then they win. Amusingly, this darkest hour structure is replicated almost identically in the second movie, when during the fight with Ego, their empath is KO'd, all the heroes are down, the bad guy's up, it looks like he's gonna win, and then Peter breaks the darkest hour by doing something Petery, although in this case it's accompanied by a celestial power-up and a giant statue of Pac-Man. Thor Ragnarok does a much more textbook personal darkest hour, when during the final fight with Hela, Thor gets his ass kicked into a near-death experience and chats with his dead father. Thor realizes he can't win as he is, or rather as he thinks he is, and Odin points out that Thor is not the god of hammers, he's the god of thunder. One moment of self-realization later, Thor is pulling out the lightning to a kick-ass 70s soundtrack, and he actually keeps the self-realization ball rolling when he recognizes that they don't need to save Asgard, they need to save its people, and Asgard will survive.
And this is an example why Thor Ragnarok is perhaps one of my favorite example here of theme again. Thor Ragnarok is so well liked because it knows its themes, it executes them well, right? It is aware of the themes that it is wanting to tell, and it does not shy away from them, right? Don't shy away from the themes in your stories, right? Of course, right? People are different, and like you don't know, for some writers, maybe you don't want to go into, because Taika Waititi, he says he does not go into a story thinking about the theme. He just goes in thinking about like a story. The themes come later. I think he said that in some interview or whatever. Personally, I kind of think of theme first. I'm like, all right, this is kind of like the theme I want to tell. What kind of story can I fit into this theme, right? That's kind of how I look at it. But once you're writing your story and you're realizing, okay, this theme is, I think, reoccurring within the story here, let's incorporate it deeper. Let's not shy away from this being the theme of the story, right? Like, once you realize your theme that you're trying to tell, don't shy away from it.
Through them. He also finally comes into his own as a genuinely responsible and wise king, until his character development is completely negated by the events of Infinity War and Endgame, but that's cool, I'm not bitter. Now, if you want a darkest hour...
Yeah, yeah, I mean, Infinity War, I felt like handled it pretty well. They gave reason for it. It did feel a little cheap, though, because it happened so quickly after Ragnarok. Like, I think it was literally Ragnarok came out, and then just a few months later, Infinity War came out. And so it really didn't feel like we got to have that linger. I think there should have maybe been one more movie in between, but like, I understand why they did what they did.
Formula. For that, we go to the masters of formulaic storytelling, Disney. Every Disney movie has a darkest hour just before the climax. If the movie has a liar revealed plot where the main character is keeping something from the other characters, the darkest hour...
Isn't there a thing in Disney movies, in Disney animated movies, where like essentially the darkest hour happens almost exactly at the same minute in every movie.
Will be initiated by this lie being revealed. But even without that, Disney knows their darkest hours are most effective if they pair dark plot developments with personal conflict. So the main characters will usually be separated one way or another for the darkest hour. The darkest hour in Frozen sees Elsa imprisoned while Anna nearly dies of a frozen heart, and they're both still mad at each other from the thing in the ice castle. In Mulan, her identity's been exposed and she's been abandoned by the army while the Huns secretly invade China and she has to stop them with basically no help. In Moana, the darkest hour comes when Maui's fishhook is damaged and he abandons the quest, and Moana gives the heart back to the ocean, telling it to choose someone else because she's failed. In Wreck-It Ralph, the darkest hour happens when King Candy tells Ralph that Vanellope is a glitch, and if she's allowed to race, the game will be unplugged and she'll be unable to escape, so she'll die. In order to save her, Ralph destroys the cart he made for her, along with her dreams, sinking into a depression because he feels he'll never be able to be anything other than a villain who destroys everything he touches, and his game's gonna be unplugged because this isn't sad enough already. It's only when he realizes Vanellope's face is on the actual arcade machine that he realizes she can't be a glitch if she's part of the branding, so he goes back and fixes everything. In a similar vein, Zootopia gave us a darkest hour that's, a little complicated because of all the allegories in the narrative, but basically, Judy accidentally makes everybody racist and commits a microaggression on Nick, so they're not friends anymore, and she goes home to her parents' farm to wallow until she accidentally learns something that doesn't line up with what the bad guys told her, so she goes back to fix everything. This kind of happens a lot. Disney heroes are very trusting. There's a lot of darkest hours, basically, and it's a very popular trope in what I can only describe as formulaic storytelling. It sees plenty of use in creative media and can be a very effective tool.
See, I don't like the term of formulaic storytelling, because storytelling to me is just storytelling. It, like, again, as I've said consistently in all these trope talks, tropes are tropes for a reason. We like them. They become tropes because we like them. In most cases, right? Yes, there are tropes that are problematic, right? And we don't like them for a reason. But like, in most situations, tropes are tropes because they work. They consistently are good. We want them in our stories. We want these moments in our stories. I don't think that makes it, technically, by definition, yes, it makes it formulaic. But I don't like that term because it's, I don't know, it just feels like it has a negative connotation. Stories are stories. We've been telling them for thousands of years. We aren't going to come up with anything new or original in our stories anymore. Everything's been done. Quite possibly every combination of story has been done. Because, again, we've been telling stories for thousands of years. And there are only a limited amount of tropes. So we've most likely done every single combo. But it is that every single person has a unique lived experience. So while every story has the same beats, has similar beats to another story, they are still unique because, at least personally, a story is good when the author is like, you know, incorporating their, like, they are telling a story with their lived experience, right? Because that is what makes it unique. The author's lived experience is what makes the story unique. Their perspective on life, their individual perspective on the world is what makes the story unique and original. So when an author does that, right, like, that's, yeah, like, but if you, of course, have a writer that is kind of pushing themselves away from the story itself and not putting themselves into the story, their lived experience, their perspective, blah, 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 into the story, then, of course, you get, I would say, a formulaic story, right? But, yeah.
Tool to pair character growth with plot development, but it's almost seen as a requirement by anyone who follows a narrative formula to pace their story out. And because it's seen as a requirement sometimes, it's not always written with much thought, which can cause problems. So let's talk a bit about how darkest hours can kind of fall flat. First problem, if the darkest hour is token. Not actually all that dark, just there because we need to have one. The one in Guardians of the Galaxy is fine, but it is kind of token, doesn't really add much other than a bunch of a-holes standing in a circle. These darkest hours don't pack much of an emotional punch. On the other end of the spectrum, sometimes darkest hours hit too hard. If it goes really dark, or if it goes on for too long, then you can actually make your audience too miserable for the post-darkest hour catharsis to work. Being mean to your audience.
For me, that was, like, I love the Poppy War trilogy. But for me, for my personal taste, the ending of the Dragon Republic, that darkest hour was too much for my own personal taste. I still love the series. I still will put that trilogy as perhaps in my top 5 of favorite fantasy stories. It's probably in the top 5. It's not gonna crack top 3. I think top 3 is probably gonna go Lord of the Rings, Song of Ice and Fire, and Star Wars are probably the top 3. Fourth place is probably going to be the Burning series by Evan Winters, but it really depends on how the last 2 books go. Right now, Poppy War is sitting at 5. But yeah, for me, the Dragon Republic was just like, I love the story that R.F. Kuang was telling, and I love most of the characters within the world. But holy shit, was it depressing! It was too depressing for me.
Audience is a delicate balance, and if you stray too far out of the Goldilocks zone, you might end up hitting your audience too hard. Sometimes, for example, a Darkest Hour will feature a major character death that the post-Darkest Hour catharsis doesn't fix. This sours the victory because it's a little hard to celebrate when people are still dead. This also happens in, say, superhero movies when the Darkest Hour had a lot of collateral damage and it's a little hard for the audience to celebrate when the background of the shot is 9/11 times 100. The third big problem is the zero agency protagonist. If your hero doesn't take any action to escape their Darkest Hour, if they're just pulled out of it by circumstance, then that completely negates the actual benefits of a personal Darkest Hour. We're not seeing our hero triumph, we're seeing them dragged into a victory they didn't earn. Your hero should never feel like a sandbag on the plot. A Darkest Hour is the perfect place for some character development, and a character can't develop if they're a passive player in their own story. This is running a little long.
Overall, Darkest Hours are useful. Personal Darkest Hours are more emotional than plot Darkest Hours. Formulaic writing can lead to flat token writing. So if you're going to write a Darkest Hour, have it mean something. And again, just to have something mean something, avoid formulaic writing and token writing. Literally just put yourself in the story. Your lived experience, your perspective on the world is what makes it unique. The point is to make the victory better, not to make the story unpleasant.
Basically, Darkest Hours are structural elements that lend themselves very well to character development and are good for emotional catharsis and stuff, but you gotta make sure you're putting some thought into them so they actually impact instead of just being a dip in the enthusiasm of the plot. So, yeah, before we go, thanks.
And that was Trope Talk Darkest Hours. Is this the second longest or is it the third longest? I can't remember. I feel like I know we've had one that was over an hour. I can't remember which one it was. I can't even remember what I yapped about for so long, but this one's up there. I really love having the Trope Talks be this long. It's always, I enjoy it a lot. These are genuinely, like, these fantasy fantasy writing reactions. They're my favorite to record. They do take a while, so like because they take so long, because I talk a lot in them. I feel like I have actually a lot to provide in regards to these. They take a while, so I don't want to record too many of them because time. And they don't get they do decent in views, but not like the best. The views of these videos get like pale in comparison to miscellaneous myths. But they also do better than History Summarized. They're like in the middle if we're looking at overly the numbers that my OSP reactions get. But yeah, that was Trope Talk Darkest Hours. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.